Unification of religions. A nice idea, but how do you do it? First, you need a big stack of books about religions. There are whole libraries of religious books. Is a big stack enough? Whether whole libraries or just a stack, it is we who need to understand and act on what we understand. Reverend and Mrs. Moon's approach to unification of religions. Please read along with me. You can unite Christianity if you set aside the elements that cause disunity and preserve the core around which all Christians can unite. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Thus, we need to form a new system of truth, namely a new view of the central truth of the Bible as it developed through the Old and New Testaments and points to the future. Such a view should be God's view and the view of the spirit world. Christianity has not been able to discover this central core. Before the spirit world can cooperate with man, God must give a hand and offer his cooperation, for God is the king of the spirit world. If the king rejects something, no matter how anxious his soldiers in the spirit world may be to cooperate with it, they may not. Only when God the King becomes excited and approves something may his soldiers, the people in the spirit world, help us out. Therefore, when the Unification Church selects the central points from the Old and New Testaments, they must impress God enough for him to say, "That is true. The Unification Church is quite good." In order to move the spirit world, our teaching must not only be endorsed by God, but also accord with the desires and hopes of the many saints and religious leaders who lived and worked on earth. It must explain the core of what Gautama Buddha wanted to propose, what Confucius wanted to carry out, what Jesus wanted to preach, and even the content of things yet unknown. All these people must give their seal of approval. The problem is how to connect the religions of servant and adopted son to the religion of son, which is their center and vehicle for reaching the religion of parents. Only then can a system endorsed by the heavenly spirit world and God emerge. So, do you think we can naturally unite Christianity throughout the world? Yes. You may still prefer the name Unification Association, but it remains the Holy Spirit Association for the unification of world Christianity. We are confident that we can make it a reality. Unification Church members are funny, crazy people, but not crazy in a bad way. They are crazy for the attainment of a purpose. What is the purpose? To fulfill the contents of the Old and New Testaments and, with all the spirit men in the spirit world, to build a world centered upon God's purpose. The goal of our movement is to attain the will of God. In the Unification Church, therefore, we are continuing the work of the Holy Spirit. Not that Jesus appears from the spirit world and teaches, but that the true parents do the teaching. True parents mean not only the Lord, the bridegroom, but the bridegroom and bride together in a horizontal reciprocal relationship. The father-son relationship is a vertical realm of heart, different from the horizontal reciprocal relationship. Therefore, someone in the position of parent with a substantial physical body on earth can teach you through spiritual phenomena, just as Jesus did. Do you understand? I can channel into the physical world the work of people in the spirit world. Many Unification Church members have gone abroad as missionaries. Some were imprisoned, others were expelled from their countries, but returned again and again, undaunted. They did so because I appeared to them spiritually and directed them. They returned eagerly because I asked them to. In Japan and the United States, members work more than 18 hours a day, not because they are forced to, but because they see spiritually true parents working on the forefront leading them. That is possible in the Unification Church. Saints and sages of the past had to spend more than 40 years working with the utmost sincerity in order to connect with the spirit world. In the Unification Church, members can attain that through working just 40 days with utmost sincerity. The Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, May 1st, 1981, Seoul, Korea. Furthermore, the role of God's new religion is not to combat other religions, but to be compatible with the truth in them all, and thus link them all together, uniting them into one. This religion will not only influence the nation of its origin, but will embrace all nations and cultures, having the power to unite not only the people from one homogeneous culture, but those from all cultures. This is the kind of religion God is ultimately seeking to establish. This is from God Depends on Us Alone, June 1st, 1977, Reverend Sun Myung Moon. This is the calligraphy for the World Research Institute for Science and Technology, RIST for short, created by Reverend Moon in 1983. Notice the top character for truth is similar to the Om character of Hinduism. This aroused my curiosity about the possible connection history between the two. I had been told by a doctor from Pakistan that the Om symbol was all over the place in Mohenjo-daro. So as it turns out, I couldn't identify really any connection, historical connection between the Om character and this calligraphy. And in fact, the kanji for truth in Korean is quite different. And Koreans themselves, when they see this character for truth, they wonder about it. And when I tell them it actually stands for truth, they say, oh yeah, now I see it. So anyway, truth and sincerity. So this is the thing that sparked my interest in the comparative symbolism or mystical symbols of the various religions and mystical experiences and finding common denominators amongst them. And this slideshow is a spin-off of that. This reading gets even more interesting as we go along. Please read with me. In the divine principle, there is a section in the principle of creation about the original or divine mind. That mind is the essence of each person, being the living soul which is eternally connected to God. It is through the original mind that people can be regenerated to live the true value and purpose of life here on earth. Without the divine mind, we have no means by which to make any relationships between ourselves, God, the spirit world, and the physical world. Your divine mind functions in conjunction with your conscience. As it does, your whole body will certainly have a purpose and direction. By working in obedience to your divine mind, you will become one with God. The greatest problem of humanity today is the separation between mind and body, with these two contradicting each other instead of harmonizing with each other. In restoration, it is when the divine mind or soul becomes the master of the human body that a person's life can become God-centered. It is as if God's mind were coming to dwell within that person. As a person responds to this divine mind, that person will find his purpose and goal. Fallen man has no hope or direction unless that connection with the divine mind takes place. Until then, man's existence cannot have value. The purpose of religion is to plant the divine mind in the human heart. There are many kinds of religion. Some form small circles and others large circles, but some even form distorted circles. The important thing is to realize that even though there are many religions, very few actually deal directly with the divine mind. Fallen man's ultimate goal is to reach his divine mind. Religions have evolved now to a point where they are close to finding the divine mind, yet still they have not touched it. They circle around and come out again, yet they do not see it. When the true religion of God finally is fully revealed, its focus will be the divine mind. It may come out and go in and circle around many times, but still it will not fail to pinpoint the target. The amazing thing about this search is this: in searching from the outer to the inner circle, the individual is in front. However, after reaching your divine mind, there will always be someone else in front of you. From that time on, God is ahead of you. Once you reach the divine mind within you and come back out to the world, you will find that God is already before you. Thus, nothing will be able to disconnect you or overcome you. In this way, the world is guaranteed of finding peace. Regardless of what age one may live in, every human being is a seeker. We are pioneers searching after the center of the universe. In our common search after the truth, however, we must be careful to not misjudge our ultimate goal. Some people think that the most fundamental goal in the universe is money. Yet those who accumulate money realize that it is not the highest goal. Many people seek power, while others pursue knowledge. But once they reach their objective, they feel empty. What they sought was not the central point of the universe. This is from the Spirit World and the Physical World, February 6, 1977, Reverend Sun Myung Moon. This is a diagram of the original mind that we have just been reading about. I copied it from a 2003 Korean Ambassadors of Peace manual. The dynamics of it are that the original mind is the result of 3 inputs, and then itself produces 3 outputs, which are emotion, intellect, and will. So Hananim is God, and the Sengshim is the life mind, the Yukshim is the body mind, Bonshim in the middle is the original mind, and then Jungji and We are emotion, intellect, and will. Please continue reading along with me. You may be a university student working hard to get good grades in your courses, but the scope of academic learning is like a peanut compared to the mission you are called to fulfill. All the knowledge of the world is nothing in comparison to this. I am offering knowledge of the meaning of life, of the tree of life. Presidents of nations and the royalty of this world will have to learn this and follow it. When you read my book of sermons, God's Will in the World, you can see that I have spoken the truth plainly and boldly. There are no more symbols or parables. I have set everything before you. The truth has emerged. This is real knowledge, the knowledge that you need. Who decided the heavenly 4-position foundation? This is God's original principle. No human being devised it. Without going this route, no one enters the kingdom of heaven. According to our principle, will single individuals enter the kingdom of heaven, or those who fulfill the heavenly 4-position foundation? The kingdom of heaven is composed of families. The family is the building block. What kind of family are we talking about? Each of you has to establish your own family. You or your spouse start out by saying my family, but when children are born, it becomes our family. When Adam and Eve are united, it becomes our family. When you include God, it becomes God's family. So my family becomes our family, which ultimately becomes God's family. The kingdom of heaven is fulfilled first of all in your heart and your mind. This internal heaven will then manifest itself in an external heaven. This is the blueprint of the ideal of creation. Do you understand? When you have finished this course, you will become its fulfillment. All things of creation humbly and obediently long to serve the purpose of true men and women. In a similar way, men and women should obediently serve each other. Furthermore, when men and women come together, they should humbly kneel down and ask God to use them to do His will. Your basic attitude in life should be gratitude. Women should feel, I thank God for the opportunity to serve my husband. Men should feel the same way about their wife. Both of them should think, thank God we have the opportunity to serve our children and the opportunity to serve God. We are ready to give our lives to fulfill God's purpose. We are deeply grateful to do this for the sake of true love. That's from God's and Our Decision. At the beginning of that May 1st, 1998 speech, there were not many people there because it was a Friday. Reverend Moon began his talk by drawing a plus sign at the top and middle of the chalkboard. The progression of the diagram continued as was illustrated in this short animation. The first word he wrote on the board was conscience, after which he moved his hand along that line and said when God first began to create, he poured out his energy along the horizontal line of conscience. Then Reverend Moon wrote the words love, life, and lineage. As he finished his diagram, I was amazed to realize that indeed this was Reverend Moon's version of what is known as the natural array version of the Jewish tree of life of Kabbalah, a picture of which is included later in this slideshow, and which is taken from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's translation of and commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah. The purposes of this slideshow is to study the four-position foundation as God's original principle that is revealed in natural processes studied by science, and as well in the symbolism of the various religions of the world. These next few slides continue exploring concepts presented in the Exposition of the Divine Principle, 1996, the teaching of the HSA UWC, and mapping them to the four-position foundation, which is a big toe, or rather a big theory of everything, which, as we shall see, is a phrase that also characterizes the core concepts of other major religions, including science. Dr. Lee's bright smiling face appeared in front of my computer screen during the day when I was working at Microsignals in Palisades Park, New Jersey, a short distance from the George Washington Bridge. It remained there for 5 minutes. I wondered what this might mean. 3 days later is when I came up with this diagram that, in my opinion, explains the relationship between the Jewish and Hindu trees of life and the unification thought two-stage process of development. Purpose at the top of the first big circle stands for God's purpose of creation. The Logos is the Word of God. Sungsang is Korean for inner character or the mind. Hyeongsang means outer form or the body. Briefly, each individual has a mind and a body. This is the primary set of dual characteristics. Mind and body then each also have dual characteristics of either masculine, yang, or feminine, yin. A man also has a feminine essence, and a woman also has a masculine essence. Otherwise, men and women wouldn't be able to find any common ground at all, and wouldn't be able to relate to each other. The four-position foundation has 3 stages, vertically speaking, and 4 positions, horizontally speaking. In fact, in the speech myself in God's Will and the World Book of Speeches, Reverend Moon explained, when the four-position foundation is formed, a central point is needed, which is God. The center of the family is love. In 3 dimensions, the four-position foundation has 6 points, with 1 in front and 1 in the rear, plus 1 in the middle, which is the 7th. Thus, the number 7 is the number of perfection, but that is formed only after adding the 1 point of love. This particular slide maps the 3 aspects of freedom listed in the Exposition of the Divine Principle. They are, number 1, there's no freedom outside of the principle. Number 2, there's no freedom without responsibility. And number 3, there's no freedom without actual results. Next 2 slides deal with questions about the commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve had a growing period in which they had to have faith in God's word. Through having faith, they would have grown up and developed a spiritually mature, God-centered personality and been able to say, as Jesus later told his disciples, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." Or in Eve's case, she would have been able to say, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Mother." This would not mean that they would be God himself, but rather that they had perfected themselves as children of God by fulfilling their portion of responsibility. Adam and Eve were not created spiritually mature or perfect. Had they been, they could not have fallen. Recall that Jesus told us all in Matthew 5:48, "You must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." The terms fruitful, multiply, and dominion referred to the 3 great blessings that God promised to Adam and Eve in Genesis 1:28. The commandment was not given to Adam and Eve to test them. A loving parent would never endanger his or her children by testing them at the risk of their lives. God, who is a loving parent, gave the commandment, 1, to prevent Adam and Eve from falling, 2, to allow them to inherit God's creativity in heart, mind, and body, and 3, to qualify them to have dominion over things of creation with the heart of God. Why did God allow man to disobey his word? There are 3 reasons why God did not interfere with the fall of man. 1, for the sake of the absoluteness and perfection of the principle of creation. 2, that God alone be the creator. And 3, to qualify mankind as Lord of creation eventually. There are 4 aspects of our original nature that are exactly the opposite of the 4 aspects of fallen nature that originated through the process of the fall. These are seeing from God's viewpoint, keeping our proper position, maintaining a proper order, and multiplying goodness. The individual truth body. Unification thought explains that the process exists that finally allows the identity maintaining and the developing 4 position bases to engage in give and receive action and to produce a result. Notice that I included the arrows labeled love, life, lineage, and conscience, tracing a path from the origin to the subject, and then the object of the division stage, and then to the union stage where the result appears, and then back to the origin, forming a circle. This final stage of returning to the origin means returning to one body with God, or returning joy to God. Recall that God said, "My word will not return to me void." This represents the direct dominion of the love of God after passing through the 3 stages of growth, which are governed by the indirect dominion through the autonomy of the principle. What is the autonomy of the principle? Perhaps it means being governed by the conscience of nature that God poured out his energy along the horizontal line of when he first began to create. This is why St. Paul said in Romans 8:19, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons and daughters of God." Thus, as Reverend Moon explained in the video clip, lineage is the subject of conscience. The identity-maintaining 2-stage process is centered on the highest realm of heart that never changes because it is already the highest. What is this realm of heart? It perhaps is what Buddha experienced, after which he explained that he had become enlightened. Buddha, in a sense, skipped the God of personality that Jesus testified to as our Father and went to the root of God, which is the root of the lineage of God and Jesus, whose tree of life we hope to be grafted into and then be able to also bear good fruit like Jesus and his bride. Join me in reading from a sermon in which Reverend Moon is talking about this realm of heart. Have you ever asked your minds where their original homeland is? Try and see. History has progressed and cultures have advanced. External environments have evolved and advanced to a certain degree according to culture or human intelligence. However, the world of the heart has remained unchanged. This world of the heart does not experience revolutions or progress. It is inherently eternal and unchanging. When you have a certain sense of purpose and set a clear goal, you will run limitlessly. When the needle of a compass is lined up to the north and south poles, there's no way to turn it unless you apply a force stronger than the force pulling the needle to the poles. Likewise, the world of the conscience cannot be moved. The function of the mind, which cannot be moved, lies in the realm of ideology. When a clear sense of purpose is set for the mind, you can certainly cause an action that can pull every cell and every emotion. Then the problem is simple. No matter how great the function of the mind may be, it cannot be more effective than the level the person has reached. Do you understand? It cannot make a greater impact than the state the person has attained. Even though it stands in the position of a subject partner, it cannot be much more effective, because the mind stands in the reciprocal position to control the body. It cannot function outside of the reciprocal relationship. For this reason, there are gaps among consciences. Although they have many kinds of differences, each conscience is somehow oriented towards the original nature. A system of thought and beliefs emerges to secure the direction of the conscience. A view of life or the universe, some doctrine, assertion, or truth appears. It is a perfected entity which has a reciprocal nature. When there is a perfect minus, we can have some understanding of a perfect plus. When there is a perfect plus, we can establish a perfect minus. This is a natural phenomenon. Since there is an eternal, unchanging, and perfect subject partner in heaven, we must strive through our hearts to resemble him and establish a common base with him. God cannot shift the standard of the heart at a whim. It can be moved only in harmony with the body. We have to control our body, put it in a certain situation, and align the orientation of the heart with the laws of the universe. God wants such laws of truth to be established. If a truth appears which can link the world together and join it with the principles of heaven, the conscience can expand outward without limits and be active. This is the reason human beings have sought truth. However, in the civilized world, which prides itself on 20th century culture, we have not seen the emergence of a truth which encourages us to establish a natural common base with the infinite absolute being, whom we want to seek from the depth of our hearts. For this reason, human beings have not been able to transcend the grief of the fall. This is from We Who Are Walking a Life Course, Reverend Moon, September 6, 1959. Representing the first and second blessings as two-stage processes, we can perform graphical addition of processes and produce a 10-position foundation diagram. Reverend Moon illustrates this process of the first and second blessings somewhat differently, which I have to point out right away. Otherwise, a lot of unification thought doctors will get mad at me and accuse me of changing Reverend Moon's teaching. I must further admit, however, that I never showed this diagram to Reverend Moon. The reason I am using it is because, in my opinion, it shows quite clearly the relationship between unification thought of Reverend Moon, as formulated by Dr. Lee at Reverend Moon's request and approved by Reverend Moon, and the upcoming slides that present the Jewish, Hindu, Sufi, Muslim, Taoist, and Buddhist trees of life, which, as will be made clear, are also alternative expressions of the four-position foundation. I would also like to point out that the chapter on Christology in the Exposition of Divine Principle 1996 explains that since the Logos contains dual characteristics, everything that God created through the Logos also must contain dual characteristics. This is what justifies these two-stage process diagrams of the first and second blessings. The dual characteristics tree. Love produces beauty through harmonizing the two sets of dual characteristics, which are mind and body and yang and yin. In the usual unification thought diagram, the logos is the output of stage 1. The logos then is the input to the sung-song position of stage 2. In this diagram, that input to stage 2 is made vertically in order to emphasize the two sets of dual characteristics, with one primary and the other secondary. So what is the relationship between love and beauty? Beauty, the 10th position, returns to God in response to God's love, the first position completing the circle. This diagram, the dual characteristics tree, is similar to the meaning of il shim plus il shin equals il che. And that Reverend Moon explained May 1st and May 3rd of 1998. May 3rd was Sunday service. That il shim is the mind of the husband and wife during the day, and il shin is the body of husband and wife at night. So unity of the mind of husband and wife during the day plus a unity of the body of husband and wife during the night, that's il shim plus il shin, and that automatically makes one body with God, returns to one body with God, and that's what il che means. Continuing on il shim plus il shin equals il che, mind and body must be united twice, once as an individual man or woman, and the second time as a couple married with God's blessing. This achieves the substantial unification of the two fundamental sets of dual characteristics of God, namely sung-song mind and hyung-song body, and 2, yang, masculine, and yin, feminine. Another significant teaching of Reverend Moon that can be mapped to the four-position foundation is the establishment of 4 of the major holy days. This excerpt from the True Parents' Day speech from 1981 explains. Today is the 22nd Parents' Day. Parents' Day was established on April 10th, 1960, and after that came Children's Day, Day of All Things, and God's Day. Centering on Parents' Day and Children's Day, Day of All Things, God's Day, and the Day of Heaven would all have come into being at the same time. Then, of course, the history of restoration would not have been necessary. As a result of the fall, however, children have no connection with parents, and the things of creation have no connection with either parents or the children of God. Certainly no true parents have been found in the world of the fall. Salvation actually means saving the 4 heavenly days also. They should have no other origin except God. The first Parents' Day marks the beginning of transition from the old world to a new world. This transition is not a concept. In the 21 years since the first Parents' Day, the world has really changed in dramatic ways. There has been no comparable period in all history, and now the completion of that transition is inevitable. One day we will also bring a day of heaven into being, the day when the world will be united. The Unification Church is marching toward this definite goal. That's from Parents' Day in This Age, April 5th, 1981. And here's the diagram. Notice mapping of love, life, lineage, and conscience also makes a lot of sense. So love, life, lineage, and conscience is another way of talking about the dynamics of the 4-position foundation. This is the natural array tree of life preferred by the Gaon of Vilna that I mentioned earlier. The title Gaon means genius. The natural array tree of life has 22 channels along which give and receive action take place between the 10 positions, representing holy emanations, or in Hebrew, the Sephirot. The 22 channels represent the 10 fingers, the 10 toes, the tongue, and the sexual organ. They also represent the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which consists of 3 groups: 3 mother letters, 7 father letters, and 12 children letters. The three mother letters also represent from the top down fire, air, and water, as well as 1, circumcision of the tongue, 2, circumcision of the heart, and 3, circumcision of the flesh, which is the sign of the covenant between God and Abraham. The three mother letters also represent from the top down 3 levels of soul: Neshama, the divine soul; the Ruach, the eternal soul; and Nefesh, which is the level of soul that is in the blood. This diagram shows the mapping of the 10 positions to the 7 days of creation and the 10 commandments. Notice of the 10 commandments, there's a minimum standard, but then the name of each of the holy positions, holy emanations, will, wisdom, understanding, beauty, love, strength, foundation, victory, glory, and kingdom, they represent the highest ideal. There is controversy over the correct tree of life diagram, especially of the number associated with the foundation, or Yesod, or also known as Yesod Olam, foundation of the world. The oldest and most natural numbering of this position is 7, and that's according to Gershom Scholem. So in Gershom Scholem's book, Origins of the Kabbalah, page 152 through 162, on page 161, Scholem concludes, nevertheless, as we have seen, it is precisely its older position as the 7th that explains much better than the later reorganization some of the most important elements of this symbolism. Okay, there are 2 Sabbaths, one vertical or masculine and the other horizontal or feminine. The masculine Sabbath is the Yesod, representing the male sexual organ, and the 7th commandment, don't commit adultery. The feminine Sabbath is Malkut, representing the female sexual organ, and the 10th commandment, that includes don't covet your neighbor's wife. In this diagram, I've represented the origin by the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, which people are only supposed to, or rather the high priest was only supposed to speak once a year in the most holy place in the temple. And if he mispronounced it, they had the safety mechanism that they wouldn't have to go in themselves and risk being killed. And so they tied a rope around the high priest's ankle in order to drag him out if he mispronounced it and was somehow struck dead by God. So this is known as the Yad He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton. And I didn't pronounce it correctly for sure. Supposedly the last person who knew how to pronounce it correctly was killed at the destruction of the Second Temple around 70 AD. So below that, in the next 3 large circles, are in fact the components of the rest of the 10-position tree of life. And notice that love, life, lineage, and conscience act as the glue of all 4-position foundations. This is a Hindu view of conscience by Ramchandra of Shahjahanpur from February 24th, 1973. I've come across many a person who argues with that in him that is not in himself. Some also say they have made their conscience as guru or master, but I am sure they have not made their conscience as their guru, but their own ego. The conscience, as described in the Shastras, is made of 4 things: manas, mind; chit, deeper mind; buddhi, cognition; and ahamkara, ego. If all these become perfectly purified, conscience will give you only correct signals. After the purification of these things, there come the higher powers, and at the same time, purity has now begun all round. I hope people will excuse if I add a little more in the context that incorrect way of worship will lead to the incorrect result. We all desire for realization, but we have no yearning for it. I pray that we all return to our original condition and see the difference between the earthly and the heavenly life. So this symbol is the emblem of Sahaj Marg Meditation Mission, and which is in over 120 countries, and which I learned in my year at RPI, 1973 to 1974. And from the website of Sajmarg Mission, I took the explanation of this emblem, which I'm going to read. The emblem represents a complete picture of the system followed in the Sri Ramchandra mission. The writing at the bottom indicates that the organization was founded by Babuji Sri Ramchandra of Shahjahanpur in memory of the first guru of the system, Lalaji Sri Ramchandra Fadagar. The swastika mark near the bottom represents the point from which we start our spiritual journey. The swastika historically is a symbol of prosperity and good fortune, widely used throughout the ancient and modern world. The word is derived from the Sanskrit swastika, meaning conducive to well-being. In India, the swastika continues to be a very auspicious symbol of Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists, and is used to denote plurality, abundance, prosperity, and long life. A common symbol in many religions, the swastika here symbolizes life, the sphere of forms, customs, and practices of various types. Above the swastika mark, the path of Sajmarg cuts through varying levels of grossness, as well as the mountains of difficulties and obstructions set up by our own selves, the condition growing finer and finer at every step until we attain the highest stage of spiritual evolution. The sphere of light created by the rising sun denotes the spiritual era ushered in by Lalaji. It permeates the space over the regions we started from and through which we pass on our path of Sajmarg. Satpad is just below the topmost portion of the emblem. This region of light, though a very refined state, is but a reflection of reality. Om Tat Sat is the highest attainable region shown at the very top of the emblem. It is the region of neither lightness nor darkness. It is unchanging and eternal. This pure and absolute state from which our present existence has evolved may be denoted as the sphere of eternal peace. The word Om is considered Hinduism in a nutshell. How so? First of all, we have to be breathing out to make a sound. Breathing out represents 3 states of consciousness: the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep with no dreams, as the top and bottom lip come together. Here, let's try it. Om. Now, the amazing thing is that the A, U, and represent Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and the feminine consort, Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. And of course, different parts of India, different sects might have different names put in there. So Brahma is the god of creation, Vishnu, god of preservation, and Shiva, god of destruction. And Ishvara is the god of personality at the top. And so we have a masculine column and a feminine column. The Purusha represents the internal or mind, and the Prakriti represents the external energy or body. And the Atman is an individual soul. And actually above this we have Brahman, which is Saguna, and Nirguna, which is with characteristics and without characteristics. So this exactly maps to the Jewish tree of life. So one thing to point out there is that Sarasvati is the goddess of understanding. And in the Hebrew tree, the same position, Bina, which is top of the fire column, represents understanding. It means understanding. So also Raphael Patai explained in his book, The Jewish Mind, that there's an exact parallel between Shivaistic Hinduism and Kabbalah, and that the proper examination of this awaits the appearance of a scholar who is equally at home in Shivaistic Hinduism as in Kabbalah. The silence while breathing in represents returning to the fourth state of consciousness, which is the state transcendent of time and space between the in-breath and the out-breath. And actually, Reverend Moon at the Martial Arts Conference explained that sometimes we breathe in and we feel like we don't have to breathe out, and we have a lot of power and we can use it to either heal people or break bricks. And guess what? The Qigong masters do exactly that. And here we have those four states of consciousness mapped to the four-position foundation. So the Turiya state is that transcendent state, and it literally means the fourth state. And the dot represents God, and the crescent moon represents the power of God, like God's mind and body. So dual characteristics. And in this diagram, I put it all together, coalesce it, and we have the Om at the top as representing the blueprint within the seed of the universe, and that's represents Brahman, Saguna, and Nirguna, as I mentioned, and the absolute infinite. And there's also a personal and impersonal aspect, as I previously explained. And so this, the A, U, and three states of consciousness, kind of represent Sat, Raj, and Tam, and the ideals of each of these three states of consciousness. And I would like to mention that Ramchandra mentioned that deep sleep with no dreams is actually the pure, innocent, sleeping baby consciousness of nature. And I also might point out that as we transition through waking and then sleeping, dreaming, deep sleep with no dreams, we do actually have, you might say, in between thoughts is the transcendent state. So various people, including myself, I can explain experiences of this that are rather extraordinary. So people do experience the transcendent state, and it needs to be experienced to understand its existence and significance with regards to the four-position foundation. So again, this is a diagram representing Hinduism in a nutshell, or the Om, and we can again draw the love, life, lineage, conscience arrows, which represent in a valid way the glue that connects the positions of the four-position foundation. God Speaks is an amazing book by Meher Baba, and it has a lot of diagrams in it, and he talks about these various experiences that he had and states of God and human beings. And I can't pretend to explain properly about the entire book, which actually I have a recent copy of right here, but it is an amazing book. And he talks about the Om point. He talks about actually an inner Om point and an outer Om point. And these actually relate to an inner four-position foundation and an outer four-position foundation, and a relationship between them and the process of creation. And he talks about the whim, that God had a whim, and the development of that whim. And furthermore, Meher Baba explains how God grew up. Ramchandra also explained that God was a later development, as he put it. In other words, God grew up. Reverend Moon also explains that. So one might wonder, since this happened billions of years ago before creation, how could any human being experience that? Well, that's one of the amazing things about meditation, that according to Ramchandra, and anybody who actually meditates can experience this, is that the first barrier to be broken in meditation is the barrier of time. So this means that God actually shared with his children, such as Mayor Baba and Ramchandra, and also Reverend Moon, and certainly with Jesus and Buddha. God shared with them very deep aspects of his heart and of the reality of the universe, and what the purpose of creation is, and why we exist. We actually exist because God exists. God created us. So Reverend Moon explained at one point, he said that because of the nature of the root of God, of the quality of the root, there was the potential for love, life, lineage, and conscience there, but it can't be experienced alone. And therefore it was inevitable that God, who was always there, but then God grew up, and God emerged as the creator God with the purpose of creation, and then created human beings, and it was inevitable that God emerge, grow up, and create human beings as his second self, as his family. So this continues from Mayor Baba's book, God Speaks, and he basically drew something very similar to the Hindu tree of life in terms of creator, preserver, destroyer is Hindu paradigm, but he fills in the different positions with different names which indicate how he experienced it. So this needs to be compared, and this is the Arabic, I guess it is. And Ramchandra also, actually his teacher learned from a Sufi teacher. And his teacher, Ramchandra Fadagar, asked if he should himself convert to Islam. And his teacher told him no. So Sahaj Marg was developed and formulated especially through Ramchandra of Shahjahanpur, his chief disciple, as a branch, modern branch of Raja Yoga that has been modified for modern living. So I recommend that people look very seriously into these experiences and traditions from which we can learn a lot. So again, I condensed those diagrams into a four-position foundation, which seemed to be a valid representation of what Mayor Baba was trying to convey, and connected them with the love, life, lineage, conscience arrows, which again are basically commentary on every four-position foundation. So what about Oriental philosophy, Taoism, and Confucianism? Well, there's the Wu Qi, the Wang Qi, and the Tai Qi. So Wu Qi is nothingness. Or in Korean, I believe it's mu. Mu means radish in Korean, but mu means nothingness or emptiness. And so then the Wang Qi emerged from the nothingness, and that's the division stage. And then the Tai Qi is a union stage, puts it all together and has a relationship with the origin. So that's my interpretation of Wu Qi, Wang Qi, and Tai Qi. Adding the 8 trigrams gives us the 10-position tree of life. Here we have the cosmic family of the 8 trigrams. The Wu-Chi at the top, the empty circle, represents the perfect balance and unification of the Father and Mother, which are heaven and earth. And then the heaven and earth trigrams are the two next positions in the central column. And on one side we have the three sons, and the other side we have three daughters. And the eldest son represents thunder, middle son is water, the youngest son is the mountain. And the eldest daughter is the wind, the middle daughter represents fire, and the youngest daughter represents the lake. So there's another way of representing the 8 trigrams, and that's by mapping them to the corner of a cube. So you notice that there are 3 levels. Those 3 levels of the 3 lines, the top one represents heaven, and the middle one represents mankind, and the bottom one represents earth. So human beings mediate between heaven and earth. And so in a similar way, we have XYZ axes, which can be either plus or minus. And notice also interesting things about the cube is that there's one center. It has 3 axes, 6 faces, 8 corners, and 12 edges. So compare this with the Kabbalah discussion of the Bet or the Beth in the Behir and the Sefer Yetzirah. So the Beth or the Bet is the letter B, and it is actually the first letter of the Bible. And so the Behir begins by asking actually some disciples of a teacher. They ask the teacher why the Bible begins with the letter B. And the teacher explains that the way you draw the letter B in Hebrew is using 3 lines which are at right angles, and 4 of them make a cube. And so it then gets into explaining a lot of deep stuff. So you need to compare. We need to compare the meaning of the I Ching and the trigrams, which form hexagrams, and how it relates to the mystical experiences and mystical theory of everything of Taoism and Confucianism, and compare this with the Kabbalah tree of life. This is the Korean flag, which has the yin and yang in the middle, which together are the way. And then we have heaven and earth and the middle son and middle daughter, which in fact are the water and fire. And I would like to read from the autobiography of Tiger Park, Chung-Gu Park, which is titled The Sun Rising in the Shade. I recall the immortal poem of Tagore, winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. Quote, Korea, on the early day, which used to be one of the lights beaming in the golden era of Asia, the day when Korea kindles that light again, you will become a bright light of the East, the land whose mind has no fear and whose head is straightly lifted, the land whose intellect is free and world is not broken in pieces with high walls, the land whose keen intelligence is not lost in the sandfield of rigid habits, the land whose endless endeavor is stretching its arms towards perfection, the land whose mind is guided by infinite thinking and acting. As such a heaven of liberty, my fatherland, be awakened, be awakened. So this is a very colorful 4-position foundation representing the ideals of Buddhism, and especially the Trikaya, which are the 3 bodies. And this is in particular of Mahayana Buddhism, which Tibetan Buddhism is. So the Tathagata is, in the section I was reading, is explained as the passed away one. So Buddha, by negating himself, became a 0, and then realized that the universe was working through him and he had discovered his original mind and true personality. That's how I interpret that. And the Bodhisattva is the person who hangs around instead of going to nirvana in order to liberate all sentient beings. So this will be explained in the next couple diagrams a little bit. This is a quote about meditation. We seek the deep ravine of the world of mind. Buddhists who meditate also ask, what is mind? And enter the deep ravine of the mind. When you enter the deep ravine of the mind and journey to the state of the original mind before the human fall, you will be connected to heaven. Indeed, without entering the world of the mind, you cannot make a relationship with heaven. That's from Sun Myung Moon. Another quote on meditation. You should set aside some time to experience the joy of being with your original mind. It may seem to others as if you are all alone, but in fact you are becoming a friend to this mind. Sit down in a tranquil place and meditate. Enter a state of deep prayer. Then you will enter a world deep within, a world that no one else can know. You need to have such experiences. Again, from Sun Myung Moon. So this Buddhist tree of life, 10-position Buddhist tree of life, would correspond to the A, U, and and the love, life, lineage, and conscience of the Hindu and of Reverend Moon's love, life, lineage, conscience diagram. The Trikaya of Mahayana Buddhism is represented here in particular. And so the unchanging absolute of Buddhism is known as suchness or thatness. Tibet's great Buddhist yogi Milarepa said altruism leads to enlightenment, whereas selfishness leads to bondage. So one explanation that is attributed to Buddhists or Buddha is that I have a limited view of myself, and there's a border around it. But then as I become more unselfish, that border expands. And as I become completely unselfish, become a zero and one with the universe, one with the principle of the universe, then that border of myself completely expanded to include the entire universe. This reading is the last 3 paragraphs of Swami Vivekananda's remarks in 1893 at the Parliament of World Religions. The Hindu may have failed to carry out all his plans, but if there is ever to be a universal religion, it must be one which will have no location, place, or time, which will be infinite like the God it will preach, and whose sun will shine upon the followers of Krishna and of Christ, on saints and sinners alike, which will not be Brahminic or Buddhistic, Christian, or Mohammedan, but the sum total of all these, and still have infinite space for development, which in its Catholicity will embrace in its infinite arms and find a place for every human being, from the lowest groveling savage not far removed from the brute, to the highest man towering by the virtues of his head and heart almost above humanity, making society stand in awe of him and doubt his human nature. It will be a religion which will have no place for persecution or intolerance in its polity, which will recognize divinity in every man and woman, and whose whole scope, whose whole force will be centered in aiding humanity to realize its own true divine nature. Offer such a religion, and all the nations will follow you. Asoka's council was a council of the Buddhist faith. Akbar's, though more to the purpose, was only a parlor meeting. It was reserved for America to proclaim to all quarters of the globe that the Lord is in every religion. May he who is the Brahman of the Hindus, the Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Buddha of the Buddhists, the Jehovah of the Jews, the Father in heaven of the Christians, and Allah of Islam, gives strength to you to carry out your noble idea. The star arose in the east. It travels steadily towards the west, sometimes dimmed and sometimes effulgent, till it made a circuit of the world, and now it is again rising on the very horizon of the east, the borders of the Sanpo, a Tibetan name for the Brahmaputra River, 1,000-fold more effulgent than it ever was before. Swami Vivekananda, World Parliament of Religions, September 19th, 1893. We have three sets of parents. How so? Nature is our first parent, our physical parents are our second parents, and God is our third and most important parent of heart and love. So this reminds me of a quote from Reverend Moon, in which he said, first you have to love nature, and if you love nature, you can love your physical body, which your parents came from your physical parents. And if you love your physical body, you can love your mind and your heart, which of course come from God. And so this traces the contribution of the parental forces that all children are indebted to. And so the conscience of good children should be moving us to return a result to God. And this furthermore reminds me of the Kabbalah concept of eating the bread of shame. And so people who have received but can't reciprocate are eating the bread of shame. So we should always be able to reciprocate, because that's the basic direction of the good conscience, living for the sake of others and for the higher public purpose all the time. So the public purpose, of course, includes all individual purposes. So this is an important reminder, this particular four-position foundation. E pluribus unum means out of many one. I took the liberty of mapping this to the four-position foundation of the family: God, man, woman, and child. The God-centered family is not just my family or our family, it's also God's family. God is going to continue investing until the entire universe represents true family values, which is also represented by the highest ideals of love, life, lineage, and conscience. The reason that we should love God is because God first loved us, as we're reminded of by Jesus or his disciples, who figured that out. We have to similarly love everybody. Jesus said, don't just love your own family members, but love your neighbors, and also love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. How could Jesus say that? He could say that because he knew that in God's original world, that all people are his original brothers and sisters and have the equal value to Jesus himself, although they didn't realize it yet because they didn't grow to maturity. God created human beings who consequently fell because they failed their portion of responsibility. But the good parent doesn't destroy people or destroy the earth and start over again. A good parent knows their value, and so God's steadfast love endures forever. Every good Christian, every good Jew, every good Hindu, every good Muslim, Buddhist, Taoist, or Confucianist should also strive to have steadfast love that endures forever.
Human beings' life course should be just one vertical line.
one vertical.
Looks many
여기
different way, but one.
이게 사위기 돼.
So if we draw another line this way and connect it that way, that represents the four-position foundation.
네. 그래 여기 있으면 말이야. 이게 이렇게 되면 이것도 이것이 전부 다 같다.
So every way we look, the upper section and the lower section, right and left, as long as we have this vertical and horizontal line meeting,
여기 가정이 하나님이 계실 것이라.
centering on this family where God dwells, the size the same.
자, 그래서 이 모든 전부는 여기서 전부 다 이게 해서 같은 거리야, 같은 거리, 전부 다 같은 거리.
So everything,
Forever.
every direction
Forever.
culminates here at this point where the family with God.
여기 표면이 전부 다.
So therefore, from that point on, every direction is the same distance.
요 센터야, 센터.
That's why we
요
call that
센터는
center point.
무슨 센터에 대한 지식센터가 안 된다고.
Not center of the knowledge,
저 힘 가지고 안 돼.
not center of the power,
그다음 뭐야? 물질 가지고 안 돼.
not center of the material wealth.
맥혀본다고 무형이야. 물질 되면 고쳐가야 되는 거지. 무형이야.
This center is invisible.
그래서 사랑도 보이지 않아.
Therefore, that's why we cannot see love.
생명도 볼 수 없어.
Life,
리니지, 칸스,
lineage,
텐나 시대.
concept, and conscience. They are all
그러면 사랑과 생명과 양심과 혈통이 보이지 않는 중심이 어디에 있겠느냐?
so center of the life, love, lineage, and conscience. That invisible center is right here.
그래, 사랑에 생명의 사랑이 달리고 사랑의 혈통이 달리고 혈통의 양심이 달려. 한 자리야, 한 자리.
So life is attached by love, attached by lineage, and a conscience. This is one center point, actually, one point. Looks like we are talking about four different concepts, but same.
양심 모이냐면 호리잔탈이 호리잔탈.
Our conscience functions horizontally.
호리잔탈. 응? 거기에 모이냐면 리니지도 버티칼.
Lineage is vertical.
라이브도 버티칼.
Life is vertical.
러브도 버티칼.
Love is vertical.
소생장성 완성이야.
Like a formation, growth, and perfection level.
양심 기준을 제일 중요시할 것은 뭐냐면 혈통이야, 혈통.
So therefore, when it comes to our standard of our conscience, the basic point, the key point is
그다음에
our lineage
생명이야.
and life,
그다음에 사랑이야.
and then love.
그다음에 love most high level.
Love is the
Top
top
God
of
praise.
this vertical line.
그렇기 때문에 사랑 때문에 생겨났으니 상대적 관계가 절대 필요하다.